okay, this is making a lot of sense. I described it recently as like finding the answer to a question that I had stopped asking. I'd like gone through all of my life always feeling slightly different, slightly on the edge of everything and not really understanding why. And I'd given up the idea that I'd find an answer.
Hello and welcome back to another interview with my Women on the Spectrum. I'm Tanya, your host, and I'm glad that you're back today. Glad that I'm back with a new interview. So, why do I interview women on the autism spectrum? Autism is invisible, you cannot see that, but people who have it, me and my guests, we have limitations and struggles in everyday life, and they are there. They are not, you cannot see them, but they're real, and they can be very hard to deal with sometimes. I think it's important to make those visible and to see the women on the autism spectrum in society, because right now she's invisible. If you like this content, if these interviews are helpful for you, please consider subscribing and also consider donating to my fundraiser. The link is right below the video, and you help me to produce more interviews and you make a big difference for me. Thanks. Okay, now let's welcome today's guest. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
Liz is from the UK. She is a writer and she's self-employed. Actually, she's doing neurodiversity trainings for employers. And she's also a collaborator in a radio show about autism. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, Tanya. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to hear your story today. So, you found out by chance that you could be on the autism spectrum, yeah? You told me you found an article and then you realized from reading it that, hang on, it could be me.
Yeah, that's right. I think I was just scrolling on my phone, bored, and I read this article, and I thought, oh, hang on, okay. Nearly everything in there was like this. This could be my life, and I couldn't let go of that idea that kind of planted a seed. In a quite typically autistic way, I latched on to this idea and researched it and read a lot about autism in adults, finding out that you're autistic later in life, and everything I read was like, okay, this is making a lot of sense. I described it recently as like finding the answer to a question that I had stopped asking. I'd like gone through all of my life always feeling slightly different, slightly on the edge of everything and not really understanding why. And I'd given up the idea that I'd find an answer. I had thought, oh, it could be this, it could be that. I'd looked at like basically the whole DSM. I'm like, no, it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. I'm just a bit weird. And I'm still just a bit weird, but it's because I'm autistic. Not that being autistic necessarily makes you weird, but I think for me that's a big kind of part of it. It puts those two things together. It's an understanding. It's like an explanation for why I am the way I am.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. So you tried to find an answer before that why you are different, and
Yeah,
didn't find.
yeah. I'd always thought there must be a reason. There must be something out there, like the rule, not the rule book, but the user manual for my brain, because I knew it didn't work the same way as everyone else's. And it turns out that is because I'm autistic. And as I have gone on in the journey about learning about my neurotype, I've realized that I also have ADHD. I have dyspraxia. So my gross motor coordination is not very good. I wish I'd known this when I was still at school, because PE was a really bad subject for me. Like making myself do a forward roll, like going upside down, my brain just goes, how are you going to do that? It won't work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, finding out that I'm neurodivergent and I have all of these different things, these different traits going on, helps me really understand how my brain works. And rather than struggling with it, I can learn how to work with it. So and accepting that, yeah, I do have limitations and I do have some struggles that aren't going to go away, but now I know a bit more about what they are and how I can work around those things and not struggle so much as I used to in earlier life.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
when I was in my 20s and 30s, I kind of felt like I was going through a bit of a burnout cycle. So every 18 months or so, I would think, right, well, it's about time that I have another nervous breakdown. I just kind of, that seemed to be a cycle that happened to me. And I sort of accepted that, oh, that's just the way it is. Every 18 months, I'm going to hit a wall. I'm going to crash. I'm going to be on the floor. My mental health is going to be ruined. And I'm going to have to take 6 months to recover and get back to where I am, so that I can do the whole 18 months all over again before the next nervous breakdown. And now I know that was a cycle of burnout. So burnout related to work, but also burnout related to existing as autistic in a world that isn't autistic and isn't set up for being autistic. So the burnout is it's not the same as workplace burnout that most people will understand the concept of workplace burnout. Autistic burnout is more than that. It's deeper than that. It's on like a soul level. It comes from trying to fit in at work, socially, with family, with friends, and just like also in society. Just being out of the house sometimes can be a real challenge. If you've got sensory problems or you struggle with being around people, the effort of dealing with that all the time just gets too much. So I've been going through this burnout cycle for a couple of decades, and that was really hard. So finding out that it's because I'm autistic means I can try and avoid that. Now I know why these things happen, and I'm getting a bit better at spotting the signs. I can hopefully avoid that.
Mm. And every 18 months, you say you had a nervous breakdown, and did you then change your work, change your life a lot as a consequence from that?
Yeah.
First, yeah.
Yeah, I've also had some physical health challenges that meant I had to switch career, but I think that was ultimately a good thing. Being self-employed is definitely the only way I can have sustainable employment, because I can be in control of my hours. I can control what I do for work. I can control my environment. So if I don't want to talk to someone on the phone, I can send an email, and I haven't got a supervisor going, oh, just phone them, it'll be quicker. And I'm like, no, I can't do the phone today. So being in control of everything about my life is really important. I know from the outside that could look a bit like I'm a control freak. It's more that having control over my environment, control over what I do, means I can manage my physical and my mental health. So I can make sure I have time to go for a walk on most days, because that's a really important thing to me. I have time to manage all of the things I need to do to remain well. And I can't do that if I'm working full time or even part time and having to go to an office or deal with lots of different people or deal with the public, for example. So being self-employed is really important. And if we look back at my school reports, there were some signs in there that perhaps being self-employed should have been the cue. Being not working well in a team was something that was often brought up in school reports, and that is because I just don't work well in a team. I'm an individual. I need to be in the driving seat, as it were. I can work in a team. I've learned the skills as I've got older, but I know that being a sole trader, a sole individual, that is what works best for me.
Yes, and you can choose what time you work, what time you take off, what time you go for a walk with the dog.
Yeah.
You can't do that in an office, in a 9-to-5 job, I'd say.
No.
Do you think it's the best solution for autistic people?
I think it's often the one that works the best, yeah. There are obviously challenges with staying on top of admin, and you do still have to deal with people. I haven't yet found a job that doesn't involve interacting with anyone else at all. I don't think that kind of job exists. So there are challenges, but I think they're a bit easier to manage than some of the challenges that arise when you're working with other people and around other people that don't understand what it's like being autistic and having to deal with people and the impact of them on your sensory systems, all of that all the time. That's quite hard. So I think having the control back of being self-employed is something that does really work well for neurodivergent people generally. My counsellor always says that. She says, yeah, neurodivergent people definitely need to be self-employed. That is the way forward.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the problem in a traditional workplace, in a 9 to 5 job?
I think there's like a lack of understanding and a lack of acceptance of neurodivergence. So I think people don't understand what autism is. They have some often very outdated stereotypes of what autism is. And I don't think it's that they're not willing to understand. It's not that they're not willing to learn. It's just that it's quite a difficult thing to explain sometimes. So the work that I do with providing neurodiversity training in workplaces aims to kind of address that sort of problem. So I try and explain what autism is, what it's like to be autistic. I look at neurodivergent behaviors that are quite common, quite normal for us, but which get misinterpreted by neurotypical peoples as being intentionally rude or hurtful or blunt or dismissive. And actually, I think when people understand that we are not intending to be that way, and it's actually a misunderstanding, it's a misinterpretation, I think that helps to break down some of the stigma, some of the interpersonal barriers that build up in the workplace. I'll just say the word office politics. I think that's something that neurodivergent people are often on the sharp end of. And we may not always understand the office politics either, with the hierarchy and the social structure and who's allowed to do what and who's allowed to park where, and all of that kind of stuff can be a bit of a labyrinth of confusion in an office system. And then asking for accommodations and adjustments that you need to do your job, that can be difficult because people don't understand why you need it, because they don't have the same experience as you. So they may be able to work in an open plan office, and that's fine. And they can have people walking around behind them and coming past them all day, and it doesn't distract them. But I cannot focus in that environment. I don't like having people behind me. And I know when I've mentioned that in the past, before I knew I was autistic, there was always the argument that, oh, well, you can't have your computer facing to the wall because then we can't see what you're doing, and we don't know that you're not just messing about all day. Like, why do you assume that that's what I'd be doing? I'm not sitting here on eBay or on Facebook all day. I just don't want people walking behind me. I like to be able to see what's happening so that I don't get surprised by someone tapping me on the shoulder and sending me into like a hypervigilant alert state. And then that takes a while to calm down from. But neurotypical people don't tend to have those experiences. They don't tend to be so affected by things like that, or by the noise of an office, or by the smell of somebody's lunch, or any number of other physical sensory things that happen in workplaces over which we have little control ourselves until we ask for an adjustment. And they're not always made. We're not always allowed these adjustments. So that's something I focus on in work quite a lot, is what's reasonable. How do we provide adjustments for people that are easy to do? They don't often have to cost a lot of money. I think the most reasonable adjustment employers can make is adjusting their mindset. That's the cheapest one and the easiest one. Once you've done that, the rest of it will be quite easy, hopefully.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I think you're doing very important work to
Thank you.
tell employers what kind of adjustments are reasonable, are necessary, and to help neurodiverse people to get their adjustments.
Yeah. I think my career might have been very different had I known I was autistic and had the adjustments I'd asked for in various places been forthcoming. My life could have been a lot different, and I may not have experienced these burnout cycles had I known about the autism and known about how much I could push for adjustments. Quite often you ask for something, you get told no, so you just leave it, and then you just kind of accept that, oh, well, there's no point in asking if I can work from home or work somewhere quieter, because they'll just say no. So it becomes a self-sustaining cycle of rejection.
That's true, yeah. Yeah. I think many autistic who are late diagnosed would have had a very different life, I guess, a different career, had they known early on what things are important, what adjustments need to be done, what limitations there are.
Yeah.
Liz, can you tell us a bit about your personal limitations that you face every day?
Yeah, so most of my limitations are on the kind of sensory end of things. I'm hypersensitive to a lot of senses. So the five, I call them the five on the face, and then I end up pointing to the wrong one. So I'm very, very good at visual processing. I'm good at jigsaws. I'm good at litter picking. I can spot patterns. I can see tiny details. The downside to that is that I can get quite easily visually overstimulated. So if I've done a lot of looking at stuff, like if I went to a couple of art galleries, that would be overstimulating because I'd be doing a lot of visual processing. I'm quite hypersensitive to sound, so I can hear really quiet noises that other people can't. And I'm also bothered by repetitive noises like people drumming their fingers or typing on a keyboard. So that can obviously be quite an issue in the workplace because people do a lot of typing. I used to
Yeah.
work with somebody in not in an office environment, but he had a habit of drumming his fingers, and it just drove me completely to the edge. I didn't know I was autistic then, so I didn't know that I ought to just say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to stop doing that, or find an alternative outlet, or drum on your leg so I can't hear it. So those are, yeah, they can be quite challenging because people don't always understand, because their experience is not the same. They don't have those hypersensitivities. They quite often see that as people being dramatic or hysterical. And when you look female, you often quite easily tarred with the hysterical dramatic brush. So it's doubly challenging to explain that actually that sound is actually driving me to the edge of distraction, and it's not me just needing to calm down. It's a genuine, my nervous system cannot cope with this. When it comes to the other senses, so there are three more sort of main senses that we have, and I would say I'm kind of hyposensitive in most of those. So we have baroception, which is your sense of balance. Mine is not fantastic. I'm best when both my feet are flat on the floor. So it took me a long time to learn to ride a bike. So when people use that phrase, oh, it's like riding a bike, I'm like, we need to use a different phrase, because that for me is not easy. So anything where I have to balance is a bit of a challenge. In daily life, that's not a huge issue. But if someone wants to go ice skating because it's fun, I'm like, I can't, because I have no sense of balance. Proprioception, so the sense of where your body begins and ends, and your like ability to move. I'm not so great with that, so I often walk into door frames and bits of furniture that have been there for years and years and years, and I can often consciously try and avoid the dishwasher, and I'll still walk into it and crack my ankle. So most people don't have this kind of I mean, it looks like clumsiness, but it is something that I have to pay attention. I have to pay a lot more attention to things like walking down the street so I don't fall over my feet. I pick my feet up high enough to get over the curb. And people can't see you doing that, so they don't realize how much extra effort you're going to just to walk around and not get injured. And then there's interoception, the sense of how you are internally. So whether you're in pain, whether you're cold, whether you need the toilet, whether you are hungry or tired. So that sense, I'm not very sensitive to a lot of those things. So hunger cues are something that can often just disappear for me for weeks at a time. When I've been in a burnout or I'm recovering from burnout, my hunger cues disappear completely. So I have to remember to look at the clock. What time is it? Do I need to eat at around this time, and make myself eat? So I have to like actively remember to eat. And that's again something that most people don't think about, because they're able to go, am I hungry? Yes or no. And I can say, am I hungry? I get no answer. So that can be, yeah, that's a bit of an extra challenge that again a lot of people don't experience. It can be quite hard to understand how that works, why somebody might experience that. But yeah, it's the senses that we don't think about are also part of autism, the challenges of autism.
And did you find a way to remember to eat?
Yeah, it really was just looking at the clock and having a schedule. I haven't got a particularly time regimented schedule, but I do like to know what I'm doing and when I'm doing it and where I have to go if I need to be somewhere. So it becomes another thing that I add into my schedule, but it's another thing I've got to keep track of.
And then you just eat although you're not hungry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have IBS, so if I don't eat or eat the wrong things, I end up with gastric symptoms, which are not so great. So it's in my best interests to not end up with a flare up from that condition. So that can make you feel pretty rubbish.
I can imagine, yes. I'm sure you came up with other strategies to manage all the limitations that you just mentioned. Can you share your best strategies with us, please?
Yeah, sure. So one that I found, one that's often seen as a problem symptom, is social isolation. So social isolation for me is a coping strategy. It's something that really helps with overstimulation. So not going and seeing friends and not going out, or going out but going into the woods where there's no people and spending time not interacting with other people and not in spaces where my sensory hypersensitivities might be triggered, is, I suppose it's like a coping strategy that's more like a whole lifestyle now, because it's such an important part of managing many aspects of my life that is a really, really big one. So walking out in nature I find incredibly grounding and relaxing. It's also good exercise. I've got arthritis in my hip. I need to keep moving, otherwise it seizes up. So that's very important. Physical movement. Might seem strange that with dyspraxia and not brilliant gross motor control, that movement is a strategy, but I find it helps to manage some of the issues with coordination. So I do yoga, try and do it every day. Started doing that only this year really, but I found that's been quite helpful. I have become a lot better at telling my left from my right. That's something I've always struggled with. And again, for decades, I just thought, it's just one of those things I can't do. And now there's an answer, there's a reason. So doing yoga has helped me get a bit of a better connection to my body. So it's helped me understand a bit where my body begins and ends and where the rest of my body is. If there's still stuff you have to do, like grabbing your toes behind your back, yeah, that's a bit of a challenge still for me. I'm like, I don't even know where I'm supposed to be grabbing. I can't do that. But it's made a really big difference in terms of just general coordination and posture. That's really helped with the arthritis as well. And it's nice to just sort of carve out 20 minutes, 30 minutes of your day to just focus on that one thing. And I find the yoga is a really good transitional activity. So if I need to get started on the things I'm going to do that day, get cracking on my to-do list, I find if I do the yoga, that helps me kind of dismiss everything that's gone before it and turn my attention to the to-do list. So that's one of the ones I recommend. And I was always one of those people that when someone said, "Oh, have you tried yoga? That might help," I went, "How can that possibly help?" And now I've tried it, and I am now one of those people who says, "Have you tried yoga?" Because actually it does. It has helped me. Yeah, I was once a yoga skeptic. I'm now in recovery from yoga skepticism. And yeah, just doing things that my brain likes to do. So I've kind of learned to let my brain take the driving seat. When my brain is in the mood to do something, that's when I do it. And that's why being self-employed is the way it works, because if my brain's not in the mood to write, I can't sit down and expect it to write. It's just not going to work. I need to go and do something else, maybe go for a walk, maybe do a bit of litter picking. That's a nice grounding activity, and I feel like I've done something useful as well. That's really good for self-esteem as well, I find. I feel like I've done the world a favor, and that's yeah, gives me like the warm fuzzy feeling that I don't actually feel, but it gets you halfway there. Yeah.
Thanks for this list. And if you're watching and you are on the spectrum as well, I have put together my best strategies in form of a video course that you can get for free. The link is below the video. You can sign up and use all my best strategies. It's also meditation, EFT tapping, affirmations, and this kind of stuff. Yeah, I'll be happy to help you. Yeah, Liz, thank you for this interview. It was really great to hear your story. And would you like to leave a message to anyone who's listening today?
Yeah, I would say if you are neurodivergent or you're questioning whether you might be neurodivergent, that acceptance is the big thing. If you can accept it, that's the starting place for moving forward. If you know someone who's neurodivergent, you work with someone who's neurodivergent, accept them, because that's where you will move forward from. We are different, we're not less.
Yes, very true. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for today. We say bye to the UK, Liz. Hope to see you again some other time.
Yeah,
And
thank you, Tanya.
bye, bye.